Hello and welcome to Inside Story. Today we're coming from the Al Jazeera Forum here in Doha. On the program today we're going to examine US foreign policy across the Middle East. In theory, what should happen is political goals and diplomacy come together with a military strategy. But with the US President Donald Trump heading towards another election, is his policy in the Middle East beginning to unravel? From Israel to Palestine to Syria to Turkey to Saudi Arabia to Jordan, are we heading into a more dangerous period? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program and welcome to our audience here in Doha. Let's get going with our discussion here on Inside Story. Our guests, first off, we have Mahmoud from the Erlangen Center for Islam and Law in Europe. We have Seyed Mohammad Marandi, a professor of English literature, Omar Ayasra from the Asabil newspaper, and Mohammad Chakawi from the Al Jazeera Center for Studies. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Can I just start with you, Mohammad Chakawi? When it comes to US foreign policy across the Gulf, across the broader Middle East, how did we get to where we are today?
Well, actually, the Trump's foreign policy entails several political ironies. Now, this month, we are talking about what would amount to declaring an economic war on Iran by pushing for a zero export of Iranian oil. At the same time, the Trump administration is handing a peace hand, or more, ushering a peace hand to the Taliban that was blacklisted for the last 20 years. So I think since we are here to talk about the Gulf, Israel, the Palestinian question, and the other Middle Eastern dilemmas, I think there is a common thread that combines them here. And I would call it the lack of a Trump's grand strategy. What we have seen so far is mixed reactions to different incidents, different case studies, if you like. His approach to the Iranian has nothing to do with his approach with Taliban, as I mentioned earlier. At the same time, his approach to the Golan Heights question differs from all the claim of being a broker of peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So there are several controversies going on. And I think what is also central in this analysis is the fact that Trump prefers to handle one crisis by jumping to another. So we don't see a settled period of time where there is a strategy that is going on. Not only that, we can also add another factor that is perplexing most of us as analysts is how he keeps shifting his positions and his statements about the very same issue.
Omar Ayasra from Asabil newspaper, do you concur with that analysis of where Donald Trump is coming from, and not wishing to put words into your mouth, Mohammed, the dangers that perhaps lie ahead when it comes to where Donald Trump is heading when it comes to US foreign policy in this region?
I concur with the gentleman, what he said. Indeed, it is the American administration is unpredicted, and as a matter of fact, it acts in a confusing kind of way. It dispenses with pragmatism, but it depends on the ideology per se. And this is very manifest in the Palestinian cause. The Americans do have a pre-judgment kind of stances, and they lean very flagrantly towards the Israelis. He asked, what's the problem with the Palestinians? They said there is this and that, so he said we need to lean towards the Israel. This has been emblematic to the fact that he took different decisions regarding Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and so on and so forth. But this doesn't mean that he is the only reason for such manifestations. He thinks that this land is fertile and he can plow into it as he likes. We, as Palestinians, are susceptible to be subject to whatever the Americans want to do with us. And this is a fact. We are the weakest side. We are terrified, and he invests in this terror, and he would bring along his bogeyman in order for us to be more in needy for him. He said to King Salman, pay and I'll protect you. He interferes in the legitimacy of certain countries. Saudi Arabia is fearful when it comes to political Islam. MBS is fearful when it comes to the militants and the Wahhabis and the emirs, and he exports more fear when he thinks that he fears from the transformations, the societal transformations, the domino effect, Iran, ISIS. He is, as a matter of fact, fearful of all what goes around him.
Seyed Mohammad Marandi, to pick up on a phrase that you used, you were talking about it being willy-nilly. Is that how it's perceived in Tehran?
I think perhaps one way of interpreting the United States is to look at the U.S. administration, or to reverse the phrase, the regime, in a sort of different light. Trump is, I think we should look at him separately from Pompeo and Bolton. Trump, I think his basic objective is re-election and to remain in power. And almost everything that he's done over the past few years was to get elected, and now I think it's to get re-elected. Bolton, on the other hand, is a neocon. He's an American supremacist, and he wants to settle old scores with anyone who stood up to the United States. So that makes him different from Trump. And Sheldon Adelson is perhaps a key figure behind Bolton and Pompeo. But Pompeo is different from Bolton in that he is a Christian Zionist. He spoke recently about the rapture, and so his world view is different from that of Bolton, and their worldviews are different from that of Trump. And that's why I think you see these different voices coming out of the United States or the White House. But I think the ultimate policy is quite similar. In fact, I don't really see, and I'm sure some may disagree, but I don't really see Trump as all that different from previous administrations.
Okay, thank you for that. Mahmoud from the Erlangen Center for Islam and Law in Europe. Three wholly negative interpretations of US foreign policy. Is your interpretation as negative as our other guests?
I will focus basically on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the role of the United States in this conflict at this time in particular. But before doing so, I think there are three main bases to clarify the American policies in the region, which are Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. These three countries are the basis of the American strategy in the Middle East, and specifically in my intervention, I will focus on Israel and the conflict with the Palestinians. The American vision to the Arab-Israeli-Palestinian conflict is that is one-sided. The world speaks a lot about the deal of the century. I don't like this expression. I would like first to speak of vision, American vision of the solution, and I think after Ramadan this will be announced, but in fact, practically, the implementation began on the ground 2 years ago, and even before that. And with this American vision, seems that it does not based on the two-state solution, which is the basic principle of the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. This is no longer the case. And second, one of the American policies to help Israel to achieve a historic victory over the Palestinians, and this kind of seen since the beginning of Trump's term, so that there should be pressure on the Palestinians. And what is new in Trump's policy is that he's trying to weaken the Palestinian Authority, to push them to the negotiation table again and capitulate. But what does this mean within the Gulf crisis and the transformations in the region? The important thing in this, and this is for And in fact, this is a movement that only began a few years ago, that we noticed that there is a strategy about this peace is reversed now, which is a model that's from outside to the inside. And this means that instead of creating peace with the Palestinians in the beginning and then normalize with the Arabs, the alternative is that to have peace with the Arabs or normalization or have good relations between the Arabs and Israel, and then using the relations to put pressure on the Palestinians inside so that they make more concessions. And unfortunately, this is something that Israel was successful in because it has had established good relations with some of the Gulf states, and it seems that a number of Arab countries are now quite understanding that Israel needs peace and normalization. As a conclusion, I would like to say, how can we understand from all these developments about the Palestinian issue, what more marginalization of this Palestinian issue? And this was seen a few weeks ago when Netanyahu's bureau leaked a number of, one session in which a number of the ministers of Gulf states, including the Bahraini one, the Saudis and the Emirates, spoke clearly that their priority is to face Iran and not to solve the Palestinian issue.
Mohammad Cherakau, out of all of these key regional zones, out of all these key playing countries across our region, which issue for you is potentially the most dangerous?
Probably the expected announcement of the deal of the century in a few weeks from now. And I think most Arab and Muslim audiences, governments, elites are anxious to figure out exactly what Jared Kushner has as a magic touch to advance this plan. We have heard about it, we have not seen it yet. And I think this is going to divide the Arab world, the Islamic world, in two main camps. The compromisers who accept what comes from Washington, since they don't have much to do with, they cannot afford much resistance, either by having their arm tweaked or because they don't have the luxury of formulating a counter policy, how to save Jerusalem or how to protect the interest of the Palestinians. On the other side, there will be a camp who will push forward for the implementation of this new deal of the century, and I think some Gulf capitals have already embarked on this journey. They are willing to help this endeavor under their own ideological and strategic interpretations that this is plan of something that could become the grand peace strategy of this new Middle East. Back in 2006, then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice visited Israel and Lebanon, and she announced her formula, al-fawda al-khallaqa, chaotic disorder, if you like. And I think this is part of a 20-year later push toward this radical, one-sided, one-dimensional peace process. And I think in the meantime, we need to observe the consolidation of the three figures, Kushner, Bolton, and Pompeo, this triangle that is pushing forward what Trump would like to offer the Middle East. This is going to be rewarding both in terms of solidifying the American-Israeli alliance. At the same time, it also serves the electoral drive of keeping Trump at the White House for the next 4 years.
Let's just put that to Omar Asyara. What is it that Jared Kushner, when he comes back with his infamous or famous peace plan for the Middle East, sometime after Ramadan, we're told, when he comes back with that, what can that plan be that we haven't heard of before?
No plan B in sight. a strategic disclosure we are living in this region. I have talked about the problem of fear. There is the problem of fatigue as well. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, they both act as if they are two empires. They having showdowns with everyone. But to what extent? Iran has reached the stage of fatigue, and if Trump would continue leveling the sanctions, I think things will go pear-shaped. The Jordanians as well are tired, the Palestinians as well, Algerians, Libyans. Indeed, we are living in a time of what I call strategic disclosure or exposure. I always say that the Palestinians are the underbellies as well as the most powerful. They can dispense with most of the centuries or the deals. Even Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, he refused what the Americans had dictated. He, as a matter of fact, coordinates things with Israel security-wise, but he cannot sign off this deal because this will lead to his demise.
Jabara, the immediate backstory, as our two colleagues have outlined, you've got the embassy being moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, you've got the move over the Golan Heights, you've got Jared Kushner, who has this very close kind of WhatsApp relationship with Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. They literally talk on WhatsApp. If what Jared Kushner comes up with after Ramadan legitimizes Israel more than they've already legitimized Israel, is there a corollary of that, which is you have to therefore delegitimize the Palestinians more than they've been anyway?
My own expectations are nothing to do with the delegitimizing the Palestinians per se in the diaspora and inside Palestine, because as you know, Palestinians are living through dire conditions, but in accordance with what I heard, I think yes, Israel will be legitimized internationally, and as well as the Palestinians, they will be marginalized. The Americans don't want to recognize the Palestinians as a genuine partner because the Palestinians are saying no to the American plans. But to what extent we as Palestinians can say no? The Palestinian Authority was established following certain formulas, and America played a major role in its foundation. However, in light of the international and regional balances of power, there is no partner that can support the Palestinians to legitimize their presence. There is an internal legitimacy, Palestinian legitimacy, that relates to our circumstances, but it's still fading away, and it is weak. As we know, the elections of the Palestinian Legislative Council has been expired 10 years ago. There is no parliament, and this is a problem. The Palestinian legitimacy as well suffers from the division between Fatah and Hamas in Gaza. This is not a political division per se, it is a societal division as well between the two geographies. This is more ominous. The Palestinians had reached the stage of fatigue. Indeed, not only the Syrians, not only the Libyans, the Palestinians at the West Bank and in Gaza, they are tired from the reoccurrence of conflicts with Israel without having in place a vision to put an end to it.
Thank you for that. Seyed Marandi, what happens when it comes to Mr. Rouhani's reaction to where Donald Trump, what the direction of travel is? Because he said, in effect, he said, I cannot work with Mr. Rouhani. That's when he walked away from the nuclear deal. The moderate quotes, and I'm using the word advisedly, Mr. Rouhani. So what might Mr. Rouhani do next? Because it occurs to me that he's maybe at a point where he might pivot in one direction or another.
I think President Rouhani will probably be taking a more, let's say, robust approach and standing up to the United States. And while the sanctions against Iran do hurt and they do bite, they have had major political benefits for Iran, which shouldn't be taken lightly. Even European countries, traditional allies of the United States, which have so far abided by the American sanctions, they've, despite their protests and despite their pretty words at times, but they do obey Trump. But politically speaking, the United States is in isolation. That has helped Iran. That has this narrative that has been built against Iran for decades has ruptured. Doesn't bring food to the table, but it does make a big difference. Second of all, I think President Rouhani will be looking for alternatives. Remember, Iran has 15 neighboring countries, and therefore many means to do trade. Oil, they will continue to export oil. They will give discounts, but oil it's a very, very lucrative trade, and they will continue to be making money. And also, Iran, I think, has been more united by Trump than ever before. The political establishment, the political parties, the different factions, they are much more united today than they have been since at least for the last 20 years, since I remember at least, for the last couple of decades.
Just to interrupt you, so that's one good aspect of Donald Trump being in the White House. Yes or no?
Well, that's a difficult question. Trump, I don't want to say his presence in the White House is a good thing, but it has had benefits because of the way in which he conducts himself, even the way in which he's treating Palestinians. First of all, I think that everything that as my colleagues have said, everything is correct about Palestine. But I do think there is a flip side as well. And that is that the colonization of Palestine, and in particular the West Bank, has been going on under different administrations. But under Trump, that which we knew was coming anyway, maybe 20 years down the road, there was a sudden fast forward. But this put the Israeli regime in a very difficult situation, because the Israelis, and this I think could have potentially positive outcomes. Either the Israelis have to carry out mass deportation, ethnic cleansing. That comes at a huge price, and it would destabilize or bring about the collapse of neighboring countries. Or they become increasingly similar. I mean, I believe Israel has always been an apartheid state, but even in the eyes of our Western friends and colleagues who like to say, well, hopefully there'll be a two-state solution and so on, but with the colonization of the West Bank, that's become impossible now. They no longer have that excuse to close their eyes to the reality of apartheid. So Israel is becoming more universally recognized as the apartheid state that it is. And three, that the Israelis, they have to kill everyone or they have to give them citizenship, but they're not going to do that. So the Israeli regime is in a very tough situation. It's not, I mean, Netanyahu, I think, is very happy with Trump. But Netanyahu is sort of like Trump. He is looking, I think, mostly for his own personal interests, his legal issues, his corruption, the court case on corruption, him and his wife. So I don't really think that he is very careful about how the Israelis are going to have to face repercussions for the policies now being carried out by the Israeli regime in Washington.
Time to thank our guests. They were Mahmoud Jabara, Seyed Mohammad Marandi, Omar Asyara, and Mohammed Chakawi. And thank you to you two for your company here in Doha. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to you too for your company here on Inside Story. A quick reminder, you can catch the program again via the website, aljazeera.com. You can follow the conversation and join in the conversation on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or you can join us on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. Or tweet me, I'll tweet you back. I'm @PeterDobbie1. From me, Peter Dobbie, and everyone on the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. I'll see you very soon.